Thank you for joining us for the Digital Her project. To introduce what the project is, we're sponsored by the Institute of Coding, which is based in Bath, and their sort of ambition is to break down barriers in learning and learning digital things and the sort of barriers to employment that, more generally speaking, that anyone could face. And the essence of Digital Her's mission is sort of the same, except the focus of this project is more on engaging and informing young girls, women, and non-binary people, anyone who basically might have been discouraged to get involved in tech, the kind of people who've said, oh, you're not good at maths and science, so yeah. So through talking to people who work in tech like yourself, we want to basically reach out to the young girls and women who may not have realised there is a perfect role in tech for them. So, without further ado, could you give us a little introduction to yourself, what you do, who you work for?
Yes, yeah, sure. So my name is Eriol Fox. My pronouns are they, them. I am a non-binary but reasonably femme-presenting person. I am often read as female, which doesn't really bother me, but it's always good to talk about these kinds of assumptions, especially when we're talking about tech and our role within it. But I have been a designer for 10 years and always actually within some kind of tech capacity. So either working on a tech product, from websites to like mobile apps to user experience research and everything in between. I made the move from commercial for-profit technology about 4-ish years ago. I started to want to be more involved from a design and technology capacity in projects that were not necessarily just about selling things to people or, getting customers for certain things, but were more about enriching the lives of everyone globally. So I moved into nonprofit. This was interesting because I have a background in community development in a voluntary capacity. So I've done lots of non-digital and digital things in the nonprofit world before moving into it professionally. But now I am a design lead at a organization called the Open Food Network, where we make a open source software tool about and for people that want to build up kind of a local or shorter food supply chain. It's been going for 10 years and it is really fun, really challenging, fully remote. My team is dispersed across the whole of the globe. Yeah, and that is something that I've been more familiar with in my last 3 roles. So I can also, I've been working remotely.
Yeah.
I've been working
for the pandemic then.
Yeah, it didn't really phase me too much. I mean, I did in 2019, I started doing a lot more tech conference speaking for my last role. So my last role before the Open Food Network was in a organization that made, again, open source software, but for humanitarian human rights related topics like election democracy and crisis response. So we're talking like typhoons and earthquakes and hurricanes, like tech that people use in those situations. And they were based out of Kenya. So, but I was doing a lot of conference visits and conference speaking and community development in the open source world. So I was moving around and traveling quite a lot whilst working remotely. So that's definitely changed. Yeah. But working remotely in general has been something that I've been a big advocate for about 4-ish years. Yeah.
Ahead of the game. So what skills do you use the most in your sort of day-to-day job?
I mostly use the skills like things like active listening, deeper understanding of problems and problem definition, I basically, more than anything, use a lot of research, discovery, and investigation skills, more than you'd expect, I guess, a designer or a techie person to use, because I sit on that intersection between, I'm a kind of, I've always been a designer that's been in-house, very rarely agency, and a few freelance projects. So I get really embedded in every part of a product life cycle. So a lot of that means in the research, user experience, and kind of discovery phase. And I suppose just gradually less and less in the visual interface phases. Not that I don't do that kind of stuff. It just seems to be the things that a lot of tech organizations and tech products need right now, is a lot of the better definition of problems. So yeah, those are the skills that I use most frequently. Not to kind of downplay the role that is as a technical set of skills. It is a very, being able to define problems really well, think about user needs, think about how that relates to technology in the wider sense, also your marketplace or your sector, and as well as then like thinking about how that will move into some of the more projecty kind of things, like the interface or like the tech stack or like anything to do with the development cycle. Those are as technical skills as, you know, writing pieces of code.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So how did your journey begin in terms of when you were sort of in school? Were you interested, were you always interested in tech, or was it more, did you start from like a design creative perspective and then sort of merge into it?
So when I was in school, I did really badly, you know, quote unquote badly in school. Like my grades were not great, basically. But and that felt like such a huge deal when I was younger. I really, and when I was growing up in the sort of late 90s and early 2000s, it really felt like there was much more emphasis on the grades that you receive and the assessments that you receive rather than your own growth and learning. And I've definitely done a 180, and that is not a measurement of your future success always. But I have always been interested in computers, actually. You know, I've always been interested in these things that enabled you to do some pretty wild and inventive things. When I was kind of growing up, I was one of the first people in my class to get an internet connection back on dial-up. I know, like, and we were using our phone line. So I was, you know, racking up bills that were absolutely astronomical because I was so interested in what the internet was doing at that time. I'm older than I look, maybe. But yeah, I have always been interested in computers, but I did a computer science class at school, and computer science back then was a little bit more generalized, and also it was boring. It was just absolutely boring, dull. They kind of taught you how to do hello world statements in different programming languages, and mostly taught you how to use an operating system and how to use Microsoft products. That was kind of IT back when I was kind of growing up. And it was boring as heck, because what I would do is I would sit in the lesson and I would kind of half listen to things, maybe do the exercises, but I'd be more interested in looking at the early Wikipedia and learning things on the internet, trying to observe what was happening. I think what I was doing was early design research in how the internet was being used, but not even really realizing it. And then I was doing things like playing games, but interested in how the games were made as well as how they were played. So I did a lot better, or I thought that I was a lot better at creative things. So I got kind of better grades for art and media and things like that. So I was like, okay, well, this is what I'm good at. So I suppose I'll be going into some kind of visual arts. And design wasn't really an option kind of back then. It was kind of something that was a little bit of a mystery, both in school and college and then university. It kind of didn't really become an option for me until I realized, after pursuing an art degree, and I did a weird art degree because my art degree that I did, Cardiff University that used to be called UWIC. I think they've changed their name now, but I did a fine art degree, but they had a department that was called time-based media, and we used a lot of computers to make artwork then. So there was a number of different like computer suites where you could do video editing, sound editing, and you could also use technology to make artwork. So I did some of that. So I always stayed interested in computers, but I didn't really ever think that I was cut out for a career, or even like a successful or well-paying career in it until, you know, I really had my first few internships and had my first few jobs.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. There's such a huge connection between like you associate with the subject like of maths at school with, okay, that might be the techie career route. And if you're not getting reassurance from, you know, your teachers that you're good at that, you kind of just rule out tech as an option, don't you?
And also if it doesn't exist in your community. So I am from a reasonably like working class background. You could maybe say lower middle class, like at the best, but definitely I was surrounded by I was the first person in my family to go to university and college, actually complete college. So I'm the first person. Actually, I do have an uncle that completed a degree, but he didn't survive for very long. But my immediate family was all tradespeople or service industry. So I didn't, as well as school not being a good model for that, I also didn't see it in my community. And back then we had less connectivity, less opportunity to find mentors and find structures to engage with. So I'm always amazed at the opportunities that you can get access to nowadays.
Yeah, that's the thing. But there always remains the sort of barrier to what you see online as well. Does always boil down to who you're surrounded by pure chance. So was there anything that sort of inspired you to want to work in the tech sector? Like you've already touched on, you know, your interest in that.
Probably was video games. I for some reason, like that was probably the earliest memory of that kind of thing. I loved playing video games. I had like a NES way back when, and it really back then it was really not seen as an entryway into technology, and it was really just seen as something that is a waste of time. Whereas I think that it's an underrated part of the entertainment and tech industry is entertainment and video games and those kinds of things. But I think that was really what drove me to be interested in how powerful machines are, basically.
Nice. So as we're sort of trying to reach out to people who haven't started their careers yet, what was the first thing that sort of brought you into the job world outside after education, the early opportunities that you had?
I think it was a combination of maybe two or three things. When I was in university and after I graduated, I had a job, a retail job that was helping me part-time when I was in university, and then I went full-time after university because I wasn't quite sure what I was really going to do. So I was working in retail, and I almost kind of, followed a very reasonably easy pathway to just stay in retail and go up in management. But I had a careers advisor who was part of my old university, and that careers advisor, I can't remember what was the moment. There was likely some kind of email, some kind of communication where I ended up, visiting the careers office and saying, I think I want to do something with my skills and degree, and I don't want to go down this path. And I think maybe it was the door of going down sort of a retail route that was opening, and then being able to sort of say, do I want to go down that road? And then just being able to have access to somebody to talk about my career with, because I genuinely hadn't, you know, talked about it with anyone else. Like, so I remember having a conversation with that careers advisor. I don't think she's advising anymore for that university. Her name was E.S. George. She was super cool in Cardiff. I think she does art therapy work now, but she really encouraged me to do a number of different things that were really actionable, scary at the time, terrifying. One of the things she asked me to do is make a list of design, because I was thinking maybe I want to go into design at this point. Because I had done a bit of illustration work before then. So I was doing digital illustration to some extent as like a hobby. And she asked me to make a list of all these organizations locally and email them and say, you know, just hello, and kind of reach out and start networking, I suppose, like early networking. And she also got me interested in volunteering, and this is when my journey into community development and volunteering happened, because she connected me up with a community development project that was local to me, literally a few streets down, you know, 10-minute walk from my house. And they were doing a number of different things, from like environmental work to, you know, local kind of policy and politics, to like youth groups. And within all of that, they had, you know, a website, and they had social media, and they had needs for a designer. And I kind of was introduced, and I showed up at their office, and I said, I have some of these skills, and this is what I'm interested in. What can I do that helps you, but also helps me? And they were actually my first paid design freelance project that is still, I designed this map with the community. So it was really early participatory design stuff as well. And it was printed, 3,000 copies sent out to every house in the location. And it was also printed on graffiti-proof aluminium, and it's like a permanent signage now in that area. So whenever I do go back and visit that local area, I look at that and I go, I designed that. It's, you know, my first thing that I designed that I got paid to do. And it was really the moment where I was like, this can be a career, and it can be a career that is, I think at the time, maybe not like lucrative or like really, you know, I'm not gonna make my millions or whatever, but it was something that that was fulfilling, that felt like I was using my skills. So yeah, that was the combination of things.
Nice. Do you have a particularly interesting thing you've worked on in your career that sort of stands out to you as, you know, when you worked on it, you were like, yeah, this is really, really what I enjoy doing the most?
Yes, several. So it's hard to pick one.
I'll narrow it down.
Yeah, I think I almost left tech after a number of different jobs, because tech is still a difficult industry to exist in when you're not well represented. And at least maybe 3 times in my career, I've thought, do I want to stay in tech? Should I stay in tech? Is it good for me? Is it healthy for me? And every single time I've said to myself, I'll give it the next role. I'll give it the next thing that I get involved in, and I'll see what happens. And every time that that's happened, I've managed to get involved with a humanitarian or a non-profit project in either a voluntary capacity or a paid capacity that has kept me wanting to stay in tech. And one of the most recent and best examples is the work that I did for the humanitarian tech company that was based out of Kenya. And I was able to work on like a technology project which genuinely saved lives. You know, it really, like, whether I could really tell which bit I designed and which part I helped build, you know, I couldn't exactly say that is the button on this tool that saved a life, but knowing that I was contributing to something that was giving a net positive to the world was definitely a moment where, and continues to be a recurring moment where I am able to work through the difficult parts of being in tech. So
yeah. So leading on from that, what are the challenges you have faced along the way in your career in tech, from anything from, you know, more technical challenges or more personal, whatever you'd be happy to share?
Yeah, there's lots. Again, it's really tricky to narrow down. I think from a tech perspective and from a skills and learning perspective, I think the general thing that's always present, no matter how many years you've been in the tech industry, is you will always tend to feel like you are playing catch up. Like, there's always new things to learn, there's always new ways of doing things, there's always new books to read, processes to try out, techniques to improve. And I think anybody that sort of gives the impression that they've got it together and they know everything is really very good at pretending. So it really kind of draws into that imposter syndrome kind of thing. Like, I know that I'm good at what I do, I know that I've been doing it for a really long time, but imposter syndrome will just be a constant sort of part of being in tech. And I do think that kind of leads on to the more personal things, which is we are still, as marginalized genders, marginalized ethnicities, and all the different kinds of ways that you can be marginalized within an industry, we are still struggling to find our like rightful, respectful place in the industry. And I don't know when it will happen. It will happen, but it is still really tricky and difficult. I've in my sort of 10 plus years of being in the industry, there has not been a place where I have moved into, either professionally or voluntarily, through contributions to projects, where I haven't at some point had to have a conversation about inclusion and having my voice heard, having my voice respected, and the things that underpin my voice. So not just my opinion, but my experience, my years of experience, my insight, whether it's based off of years of experience or whether it's based off of a good basis for knowledge. That doesn't have to be directly correlate to time, numbers, like years. But if you have an insight into something, you have a place at that conversation. You have a rightful place in that conversation. And that is really the struggle I think I constantly face, is burnout. Essentially is I don't just do my design role, which is a huge amount of different tasks and things to actually do work on, but I do community work in my actual like paid role. So I'm doing things like, trying to get more volunteers to work on the nonprofit side of things from a design perspective and a tech perspective, and I'm trying to better an experience of being involved, and I'm trying to help my team better understand what design does for technology. And it's burnout and exhaustion is something to, if you can very early on in your career, start trying to think about what kinds of things you need to put in place to be happy and healthy and well rested and well balanced. It is the earlier that you do that work, the better time overall you'll have, and the better example you'll set for everyone.
Yeah.
So I think that we've got this when some of the people that we put up on pedestals, and I also do this to myself, is like we think of people that work ridiculous hours, that do all the things, are like, oh, I want to be that person and I want to also do all the things, whereas we don't celebrate the people that have a beautiful balance between the things that they work on and the things that they nourish like their energy with. So that would be
I think that's
the challenges.
That COVID has sort of highlighted. A lot of people have been saying about how when you work at home, you don't have that physical like difference between work and life. And I do think a lot of the time, I don't know, I guess women tend to have the like childcare role more, well, obviously generalization, but so it's can be harder, I think, to get that balance right. And then there's also, it's difficult when something you're doing is really rewarding as well. And I feel like being a gender minority in tech, you feel like, you know, that's helping initiate the change, and it's always going to be hard when you're sort of the first generation of to exist doing that. There's always going to be those initial struggles, but like you said, it's the balance of not burning yourself out, and I think it can be really, really hard to remember that.
Yeah, for sure. Learning to share and collaborate is another thing that I think if you can learn early on. I think I didn't learn how to share, delegate and collaborate as early as I possibly could have, and that could have helped a lot. But there's a really amazing study, and I can't cite the actual study, but there was women who have children, or people who have children, typically women, because they are like you say, they are typically the people that take on a majority of a caregiving role, even though things are changing globally. Their productivity goes up after their child, and it continues to go up after subsequent children, because I think what they observed is that women will find women have an amazing, it seems, ability to stretch their boundaries of being able to do stuff. And maybe it's like this unhealthy thing where women think that they need to work harder because they've got a caregiving role. There might be a lot of different factors in, but there was this amazing study that showed that, you know, women produced more like better or more or quality work after having kids. So like the whole thing of like this whole sort of thing of you know, women not being as productive if they have a caregiving role, the evidence actually shows that if they have a caregiving role, they actually are better at their job.
Like the pressure as well from that stereotype of, oh, now I have a kid, people are going to think I'm lazy and not doing as much work as I was before. So you just go that extra mile to compensate. Wow, that's really fascinating.
But whether that's healthy, so that's the thing that interests me, is actually they might have observed this better productivity, but is it because of that pressure that we put on people that have caregiving roles to not you know, to almost do double a job? Because a caregiving, like, I think there was also, I remember seeing like somebody created an invoice, like a fake invoice for being a parent, and shared it on social media at some point a few years ago, and it was like, you know, if I was paying somebody to do this is how much I would get paid to do this role. And it's like, why do we not consider that you know, work?
Exactly. And then it's just frustrating when it becomes disadvantage as well. In the coffee morning TechSPARK hosted last Thursday, we were talking about how sort of the pandemic has affected men and women differently, and that more women have been furloughed to like take on the caregiving role, and how there really needs to be an awareness that happened, and that women don't get stigmatized or disadvantaged going forward in the future with like, okay, maybe they did stop work for 6 months, but there was, you know, a very legitimate reason for that, and that doesn't speak anything to their capabilities or motivation going forward. So yeah, a lot of things to think about.
For sure.
So obviously we talked about some of the negative things then. What are the things you do love about working in tech sector?
I love the opportunity for it. And I like the opportunity in respect to the younger generation. So one of the things that I find endlessly beautiful and enjoyable is when I visit. I visited Nigeria this year before the pandemic, and Nigeria and many African countries have some of the youngest majority population, and a lot of that population is seeing technology as the way to be successful in the way that they want to be successful. And I think one of the reasons that I'm so invested and interested in technology is that opportunity to really shape the future and to shape it in an ethical, diverse, inclusive way. So you could kind of call me a cautious optimist, because while I know that there's a lot of problems around privacy and security and surveillance capitalism and centralized monopolies of tech companies and all this kind of really complicated stuff, I still see in the younger generations interested in technology, and also the older and current generations, in the way that they enable and sponsor younger people to have the place to voice those and do those kinds of things that they're getting excited about. I see endless optimistic opportunity to improve how things are going. But I call it cautious optimism, because there are a lot of things working against that, and there's a lot of complicated factors that you know, you end up kind of going into global politics, and you end up going into lots and lots of tricky topics. But I still see the reason for me existing in tech is really to, you know, almost kind of Hansel and Gretel fairy tale, try and leave a breadcrumb trail of where to go if people are interested in that breadcrumb trail, or try and lay a path for if somebody is doing this. And really the thing that I enjoy the most about my tech role, I love solving problems and I love doing design, absolutely adore it. Couldn't be more invested in what I do day to day. But the things that make me really smile are mentoring and you know, giving over the opportunities that I don't need anymore. There are opportunities that I really just do not, it's really the amount that it's going to help me is negligible compared to the amount that some opportunity will help somebody else. So now I'm doing a lot of things. If I get asked to speak at events, I try and, you know, I say I would, you know, there's this list of people that I think can talk on this topic too, and here they are, and I would rather you approach them than me. It's the same with, you know, just trying to spend as much of my spare time, which spare time is like something which is a faraway concept to me now, but but trying to help somebody with what they need. Like I want to, you know, I get a lot of messages nowadays about how can I get into this sector, or how can I learn more about this to get here, or how can I do a good talk about this subject, or how can I eventually get into this company for this kind of role. And so I love things like Google Summer of Code and Outreachy as well. If people haven't heard of those internships, really do look them up. They're really fascinating and fantastic structures. And I would also recommend that any tech companies that have the capacity to do something similar, look at those as good models for internships.
Yeah, cool. So do you think there's obviously a lot of conversation right now around inclusion and diversity, and
Mm.
I feel like sometimes there's more talk than action around it. What are your thoughts on how the tech sector is sort of approaching this new awareness around diversion and inclusiveness?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. Agreed that there's more talk than action, and I think that stems from a very reasonable fear of non-marginalized people getting something wrong, or not including. I don't think that you will get it wrong if you're including all the right people and including the right stakeholders in those conversations. But I think that even the nervousness that I sense is even that step of making sure that those stakeholders can participate in the process that you think that you have to do almost seems like a hard step for some organizations and some individuals. And it's slow and it's deliberate, and it's that way because it's meaningful and it's important. So I think that one of the things that the diversity and inclusion needs around tech pushes up against is this thing that kind of has grown out of Silicon Valley around like move fast and break things, and rapid this, rapid that, let's just do something and see how it goes. Whereas I think that we can still make good things around in tech with having a more considered, inclusive approach, but it will not feel like it's at the same speed as previously. And it again brushes up against some of this, what if I need to raise investment and I need to get to market before this person, or I need to do this before this person, and it's all about like a race. And I think that it kind of maybe goes back to like the old fable of slow and steady does win a different kind of race, and is the focus on winning versus creating something that is useful and meaningful, versus you might be the first to market for something, but are you going to be the one that sustains and is sustainable in that market? So I there is I think that's kind of some of that around too much talk and not enough experimentation and nervousness around this. I also, from a very design perspective, I think that one of the trickiest things in design at the moment is a lot of design practice comes from a very Eurocentric, white male, Western approach, right? So a lot of our books, literature, processes, all the things that we take for granted are have been dictated by white men around Europe and the US. And that absolutely has colonialized our design process. And what there are a lot of organizations doing at the moment is trying to actively look at what kinds of things we do within the design process for tech tools and decolonialize them. So why do we think that this way of doing design thinking is more or less better than what might be a different culture's way of doing design? So what we are trying to do in that kind of design justice, design decolonialization movement is not say that this is like the best way of doing design, like this process, but trying to be inclusive of maybe the ways in which people from a lot of underrepresented countries and voices and backgrounds would also want to do from their instinct. So that is, and it's difficult, it's not easy, as a white person, this is my privilege comes from being able to pass as a particular gender, even though, I don't identify as such. I'm white, I'm, affluent and all this kind of stuff. It is not easy talking about how, my inherent biases will inform how I do things and how I have to work every single day to do those things better. But you have to just do the work. And if you need a rest from things, having a rest is a controversial topic because, you know, you should always be doing some work, but we all do need to rest every now and then. But one of the things to just be aware of is signaling that I am taking a short break from engaging in these kinds of topics to better engage with them at a later date.
Yeah.
That is better than just kind of removing yourself from the, you know, saying you're tired of this, da, 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 da. And the real simple thing is just, I am so, as I get older and older, as I creep closer and closer to my 40s, I am just like, I lose patience for, it's always white dudes asking me to just give them a reading list or give them the resource that will magically help them do diversity and tech better.
Yeah.
And I am just, even people I like, even people that I would go out, you know, and have a nice social time with, I'm just getting, and that's even like me with my, you know, some privileges. I just really do not want to do your homework for you. I really don't want to spoon feed you some of this stuff. I don't mind having a adult to adult conversation with you about the things that you've maybe already discovered or the things that you want to try out. But if you're asking me to parent you with diversity and tech issues, I am just losing my ability to be in that space. And I know a lot of people that are losing their ability to do that. So
yeah, the thing is as well, like, again, as we were talking about all the opportunity that tech brings you, there's literally so many resources out there that with a simple Google you'll come across something and you know whether it's worthwhile when you start reading it, because it'll be teaching you something, and if it's not, then you move on to the next thing. So people put in time to make online resources, so you don't have to have those random one-to-one approaching random people who have already taken the time to engage in the conversation about it. So finally, what would your advice be to young girls, women, non-binary people who are considering sort of higher education options, maybe thinking about their future a little bit more, and considering a career in tech?
This is something that I always used to be so certain of until I was presented with alternative information. And this is maybe an example of, you know, diversity and inclusion. So I would tell interns and young people that want to go into the tech industry that you don't have to, you know, you don't need a degree. You can learn in the way that is best for you. You could try a boot camp, you could try this, you could try that. There's no one way into tech. And I do think that that is still accurate. And I also, in general, I do think it's absolutely bananas that we expect young people to decide what they want to do early on, and that they couldn't possibly diverge that path in later years. I think, you know, that is it's fake news, it's fallacy. It's, you know, you can take detours, you can come back to things. You know, there are ways in which you can curate your career, no matter what you decide to study, no matter what you decide to invest your time in. However, I don't think that I think that that's very specific information for specific kinds of people with specific privileges. I think that that is a very, you know, Western, Eurocentric, UK-centric way of looking at things. Also, whether or not you have a certain amount of financial stability, you will be able to do that. I was presented with like the information about how very different it is in some more traditional parts of India. When I had an intern that was a young girl in India who is now not my mentee anymore. She's a friend. We hang out a lot. She's amazing. She's thriving, by the way. And within like 2 years after doing a couple of internships, she is getting so many job offers from, and she's a front end developer, so many job offers from so many companies. She can't actually decide which one she wants to take. So, but there are different structures every place in the world, and there are different kind of cultural things that will influence how you do things. There will be things that maybe you're expected to do versus you want to do, and there's always, you know, this kind of narrative that I sometimes hear a lot of, usually again white tech dudes that are privileged, say, you know, oh, you should make time for side projects, get up at 5 a.m. and do 2 hours of side projects before you start your work day, you know, which is absolute, it's unachievable standards for some people. For some people that might work, but for other people, to say that that is what you need to do to be successful is so harmful.
Yeah.
That I just want people to know that the pace that they go is the pace that is right for them. Seek help when you can find it. Ask for help. Don't worry too much if don't worry at all if somebody says, oh, I can't help you right now, but maybe ask this person, or I can help you in a few months' time, or, you know, and be specific with what you need. Like, I think one of the best pieces of advice I learned from another person who mentors a lot is I get a lot of messages like, I want to go into tech, or I want to go into this, and that isn't very specific. And the better thing that you can do is say, hey, Errol, I'm really interested in working within open source software eventually, and maybe in the cryptocurrency space or something like that. Where do you think I should start, or who can I get in contact with? Because that's not my background, but I might know somebody who can actually mentor you. So the more specific you can be is great. But also, that your pathway is your pathway, and it's okay that if some things are different to what is being said. Like, so the mentee that I had out of India, you know, she really needed to do certain things within her life to fit within the culture, fit within the society that she was operating in. And me giving her advice to say, oh, don't worry, you know, you can take as long as you need to within tech. You can do this, you can, you know, change ideas, you can change track. It wasn't actually helpful advice to her. It was helpful advice to a certain kind of person with certain kind of privileges. But then we were able to find, through conversation and her telling me, well, actually, these are the constraints that I'm working with. Once I knew that, I was able to better help and guide and support her as a mentee. So I think that is also probably hopefully good advice as well, is that don't be afraid to give your mentor or your peers more information to help them advise you better.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. Really enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully it'll be useful for some people.
Yes, hopefully.
Great. Thank you so much.
Cool.